You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast as we inch a little bit closer to the 2023 Cricket World Cup. Big news in England. Big news. Harry Brook in, Jason Roy out. We'll be talking about that in detail. And, of course, we'll be covering off the, dumpster fire or triumph, depending on which side of the coin you are on, of an Asia Cup final between Sri Lanka and India. 50 all out. 50. That's bad. That's pretty bad. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined by Max Rowe-Brown, who looks like he's on a building site. How are you doing, Max Rowe-Brown?
Yeah, very good, thank you. For those listening and who can't see, behind me is an array of boxes and a dismantled wardrobe because this is the only place we could put them while someone came and plastered a ceiling. So that's the story behind my background, but it is covering up the multitude of sins on the wall that are normally there. So I don't know, maybe it's an improvement. Let us know in the comments.
All the smut. Max, let's get straight into it. We did quite a long show last week about ODIs, and it's all the same ODIs except they played like one more. So the talking points haven't developed too much. But we'll start with England this time, and we'll do Asia Cup in part 2. So there's only been one match that England and New Zealand have played since our last episode, and that was England 311 for 9 versus New Zealand 211 all out. No one ever reads cricket scores like that, do they? I mean, it doesn't really tell you.
Like Sports Report on 5 Live.
Yeah. Like you get that.
England 311 for 9, New Zealand 211.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only usually like one cricket match on of note.
Yeah. Well, you could run through the whole scorecard like it as well.
You could, yeah. I mean, that would get a bit tedious, I think. That would get a bit.
Well, maybe just the highlights.
Look, England played Australia, New Zealand. It's a bit like Australia, New Zealand, except it's colder and a little bit further away. And by a little bit further, I mean hours are further away. Highlight from an England point of view was 100 for David Malan, 127 off 114 balls for him. And then they were pretty good with the ball as well. Moeen Ali picking up a 4 for New Zealand. Not a lot to report on there. Rashi Ravindra scored some runs in the twilight. That's when Lords looks really good, isn't it? I mean, I'll report on that. The evening at Lords is a good time. It's an attractive ground in the evening. The rest of the time, I can leave Lords, but I do like looking at it when it's the evening. And Ravindra, he scored some runs. Match-wise, not a lot to talk about, but I will give you the opportunity, Max, to give me any thoughts on that cricket that you watched.
Well, this was with all the. I mean, we'll get to it, won't we? Because that's kind of what the story is. But this was almost like the last chance saloon for Jason Roy to hope that both David Malan and Harry Brook failed, and Malan hammered the final nail in his coffin for him. It was another really good display from David Malan. He's obviously in serious form, opening the batting. So that's really good news for England. I think it's probably a slightly better performance from England with the middle order and the finishing than we've seen lately, which is promising as well, because that's something that England have fallen down a bit on lately, isn't it? They're particularly in the last game, they still got to an imposing target that New Zealand got nowhere near. But after Ben Stokes' 182, it kind of faltered when you were hoping you'd have Jos Buttler, Liam Livingstone, Sam Curran, Moeen Ali, take it away, much in the way that Heinrich Klaasen and David Miller might do for South Africa. England didn't quite have that, so there was a bit more from that point of view for England this time around. Contributions all the way down, but to coming back from those early defeats, I think it's good signs. Hitting the ground running at the right time, it's looking positive, I'd say.
Definitely. I mean, they've improved over the 4 matches, and I look a bit closer to the really good team that we think is in. The results over the last couple of years haven't been mind-blowing in the way that they were leading up to 2019, but you've always sort of suspected that the group of players when you lined them up in the right order and you were near full fitness, near the strongest 11, that they'd be a pretty convincing force. And I think we saw that over the last 3 matches. That and there's a lot there.
In comparison to those games leading up to 2019, we've played about half the cricket, really, haven't they? In terms of ODI terms, obviously. There was such a big focus in that cycle on trying to win the tournament. They played, however many it was, 80 odd games leading up to that. They played substantially less, and the games that they have played, you've either had, it's almost seemed like you've had either the batting lineup or the bowling lineup and never had the full team together in one coherent package. So it's not that surprising when you look at it from that way that England haven't had the results that you might expect or hope for a team that are looking to, dominate in a certain format. So nice to see the trajectory, I suppose, going in the right direction. So yeah. I
mean, even here, to be honest, you're probably not looking at the frontline bowling attack.
Yeah.
Well, no, let's rephrase that. You aren't looking at the frontline bowling attack.
Mark Wood.
There's no Mark Wood. There's no Adil Rashid. And both of those are I think, in the starting 11. So yeah, a lot to be encouraged by if you are an England fan. Max, we should get to the big news. After the series concluded, so on the 17th, which is yesterday, England made a change to their provisional squad. I still think they can confirm it again or something like that. Isn't there a BCCI press conference about to happen or happening tomorrow to announce their team? So I think there's still a little window where teams can adjust things. But it is as stands. I mean, it's not a million miles away from where it was. It's Butler, Moeen Ali, Gus Atkinson, Bairstow, Brook, Curran, Liam Livingstone, Dawid Malan, Adil Rashid, Joe Root, Stokes, Reece Topley, David Willey, Mark Wood, and Chris Wokes. Obviously, the change is, Max, Harry Brook out and Jason Roy in. Is this harsh on Jason Roy? Let's start there. Jason Roy has been an integral part of this ODI team. Massive. It was massive in 2019 when he came back into the team in that semi-final after his hamstring injury. In fact, it might have even been the game before that, and sort of turned the ship around a little bit. England was struggling. They'd lost to Sri Lanka. And then suddenly they had their man back at the top of the order. He's been good over the last 4 years. He's played more ODI cricket than any of the batters. I think anyone in the squad. Like, he has been a mainstay. And then right at the last minute, he has a back spasm, loses his place in the team. Dawid Malan cashes in. The wonderkind Harry Brook emerges and he's jettisoned. What do you think of that?
I think it's really extremely, incredibly unfortunate for Jason Roy. I think it's very harsh on Jason Roy, but I understand the decision that's been made. I still don't know whether I 100% agree with it. I think it's a lot of it may boil down to his fitness status. So I mean, I know what your view is, and I'm sure you'll share that shortly. But from my point of view, Jason Roy, his recent form for England as a whole has not been great, and people have picked up on that a lot. Obviously, in the T20s, he's had a bit of a tough time. He had a pretty rotten 100. He had a decent IPL when he got drafted in belatedly for KKR this year. But in terms of sort of the white ball stuff, that's about as good as it got in the short format. But people seem to have forgotten that actually in ODIs, he's been extremely good for England in the last year and a half. It's actually sort of where he recovered when people were questioning his place in the team and where he was struggling. They stuck with him for the ODIs, and he scored, 200s in his last 6 ODIs. There was one in South Africa, one against Bangladesh in some pretty testing conditions, and he batted really well for a man under pressure, and was really important for England in their batting order. I think since 2021, he averages 40 at a strike rate of just over 100, which is really really good numbers for your opener that you want. So I think on a personal performance level, it's really harsh for him to have been left out. But you can sort of look at the circumstances that have led to it and see why the decision's been made. I think there'll be a slight rankling for him and probably for a lot of people when you look at it and think that maybe there's just been a little bit of hype has cost him a place where they had him down for the squad. They clearly had penciled him in to open. And then Harry Brook scored 100 in a completely different format, and everyone went mental about him not being in the team. And then, I think a little bit of pressure got put on the selectors, and they thought, well, we're going to have to try and get Harry Brook in. They drafted him into the ODI squad to play New Zealand when he wasn't originally going to, as if to give him a chance to prove himself. Did absolutely nothing, and then has still ended up on the plane. And I think that's, I guess, as much about what David Malan's done than it is about Harry Brook, which is quite an interesting place to be, if you see what I mean. But I don't. Obviously, Jason will be disappointed. That's probably it for him as well. For England in World Cups, which is a really, really shit way to go out, to be honest, for him. But there's no room for sentiment, is there? So if you think it's the best call, then make the call. But is it the best call? Maybe. Don't know. It's tough.
You're asking me? Yeah, I think it's the best call. I think it's a really obvious selection. I also think there's a point of view to firstly address the point of view that I think is wrong. That England saw Harry Brook get 100 against New Zealand, and then were like, "Oh my god, this guy's really good," because that isn't what happened. Yeah. If you're under the impression that this has only happened because England have panic bought, if you like, Harry Brook, who has come from nowhere in the last 2 weeks, I think you're completely delusional. I think that there's so much evidence that Harry Brook will be a capable ODI player in multiple roles that England need a reserve player in. That it becomes actually, I think, a very logical decision, and I think that. Yeah, the recent performance helps. It's always great to get 100 in the run up to the World Cup. Ask Brook, ask Milan, ask Stokes, ask Virat Kohli, ask any of the guys that have gone out and done it recently. How does it make you feel about your place in the team and so on? And extremely confident and backed. I'm sure it makes you feel backed by the selectors who are will obviously be patting themselves on the back themselves for making a good call there. But I don't think it's a decision that they have made purely based on that. I actually looked this up, Max. I did a little bit of I say research, like I went on his ESPN Cricket Info page and I had a look. So I just wanted to know how good Harry Brook was in Test matches, because we know 6 ODIs, he averages 20. It hasn't started that well for him, but he's played.
It doesn't mean
about
that
6
much.
different positions. He's gone up and down the order and so on. So I don't think it means that much. His T20 record is pretty decent. It's not mind blowing. It's slightly better at a domestic level. But where I think you really get an idea of the guy's talent level is his Test career so far, where he averages more with the bat at a higher strike rate than Babar Azam does in ODIs. Like if you're not looking at what Brook's done in the whole over the last year and looking at what you need from an ODI player and thinking, that's a guy who can probably do that, then you fundamentally suffer from such a lack of imagination that I feel sorry for you. If you actually think that England have picked him based on a T20 innings and not that whole bigger picture, then there's no saving you. You are completely delusional. Why is it the right decision and why is it logical? Basically, if you look at the squad England have picked, it's got a load of seamers in it because you need backup bowlers because they get injured all the time. Bowling 110 overs full gas if you're Mark Wood in 6 weeks, pretty tough going. We saw him at the end of the Ashes. He could barely move, could he? He was bowling about 82 miles an hour in that spell at the Oval. So if you think they're getting
necessity, that was.
So they need 2 bowlers. They need a bowler to back up him, and then you need another bowler to back up the backup basically on the seamer side. They've got 2 spin bowling all rounders, which they need, and they've got a frontline spinner. And you're quite quickly sort of running out of room for reserve players. And that effectively is what it comes down to. You've got 5 batting positions in this team, or 4 batting positions in this team, really. And you have 1 player who can play as the backup to them. And Jason Roy, although I would say this, I think Jason Roy is a better specialist opener than Harry Brook. He is not a better potential number 4, or in a pinch a potential number 5 or 6. He just isn't. Jason Roy can basically do one thing at an elite level, which is exploit the power play. And if he isn't doing that because he's your reserve batter, then he isn't worth having in the squad. It's quite binary. I think you're right when you said that David Malan is ultimately who forces him out the team, because it is. If David Malan had got 2 ducks, probably David Malan would be going as the backup batter, and Harry Brook wouldn't be in the squad. It would be my guess. I think they probably think that Malan could bat 1, 2, 3, or 4, and they're probably right. Jason Roy can't do that. Harry Brook can. And then he becomes the obvious choice. He might not play a game. I mean, I think there's a realistic situation that he might not play a game. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I do agree with a lot of that. What I find odd about the Harry Brook thing is, given all those points, why he just wasn't in the squad in the first place, which is probably where it comes to the David Malan point. But it just seems it seems a bit strange if you're banking on.
He is, because he was, I think, England's in the first 11. The problem is for him, as soon as he isn't in the first 11, he's useless. It's really unfortunate for him.
I mean, the other thing I suppose
you can't drop Bairstow. You can't drop Bairstow because he's the reserve wicketkeeper. So you have to, even though Bairstow's looked a bit shaky and has got an injury problem himself, because he can keep, he's the reserve there.
Yeah.
Livingston can bowl, so even though Livingston's form fluctuates a little bit, he can bowl. Same for Moeen Ali. Joe Root is, the closest.
Yeah, drop him.
Well, you can't drop Joe Root. And Ben Stokes rattled off 100 himself, didn't he? And also
just came out of retirement to play.
So. Yeah. So it is. I do think initially it was Roy and Bairstow to open the batting, and they've changed their mind on that, and that
makes it tough.
That's actually the decision. If you were looking at this and you were saying, having them made the right call, it isn't Roy v Brook. It's Roy v Malan. If you think Malan is not as good a player as Roy, then fine, Roy should be on the plane. If you are of the opinion that Malan is a better player than Roy, then unfortunately you have to be in the camp that says we'll have the versatile batter, please.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The only devil's advocate argument I would play to that, I suppose, is there are other players who could, move down the order. For example, David Malan. You're saying if David Malan would have been the backup originally, absolutely no reason you couldn't bring in Jason Roy to open, shift David Malan down. I think Ben Stokes could bat up and down anywhere. Johnny Bairstow could probably drop down and bat 3 if you wanted him to. I think that would probably work as well. So I think there are other options that you could do, but I suppose to keep stability, you'd want the one floater, as it were, rather than mixing everyone up. But yeah, I think it's really tough on Jason Roy, but there's logic.
I think Brook is a better option than Malan going down the order, and I think that Brook is probably a better option at 3 than Bairstow going to 3, and I think Brook is probably a better option opening the batting than, say, Stokes opening the batting. So I think even though he's not necessarily the best at all of these things, you do look at it and say, well, he projects to have the capability and the talent to do it. I mean, bigger picture though, I think it's a little bit stupid from the ICC that the squads are 15 men, and I think that's actually almost a more interesting talking point than, well, it isn't the main talking point. It isn't more interesting, but it is when you look at modern cricket and the workload on seam bowlers. Having a 15-man squad is insane, because you have to select a battery of these seamers. Every nation will have to do this because they go down like flies, or they pick up a knock, or you're playing a team 3 days after your last game.
Yeah.
Loads and loads of travel. It's just not feasible for 3 seamers to play all the games, or 4 seamers to play all the games. You need 5, and you probably need 6, and then you need a reserve spinner as well, and then you need a reserve wicketkeeper. So you've already filled your squad basically before you've even got to the point where you can look at reserve batters. And I think actually it makes for a worse tournament overall if it was squads were say 18, which is normally what teams take to like a 2-match bilateral series. By the way, they take 18 men, they don't take 15. So I don't know where the ICC got this from. There's genuinely no logic I can see behind it. So if you have 18, then what it affords is a little bit more specialization in your reserve players, and I think probably ultimately a better competition overall. Now you can say, oh well, like the reserve wicketkeeper can be a reserve batter too. It's like, yeah, sure. But for most teams, the next best batter, opening, or next best middle order batter, or the next best opener is not also their next best batting wicketkeeper or wicketkeeper batsman. So you end up with this guy in the squad with the gloves who can come in to bat if you've got an injury or someone goes out of form, who isn't actually the next best option because of this stupid squad size. And you can say the same for any specialist batting role. I think opening hit. I mean, like Australia might not be able to take Tim David, which is ludicrous. I mean, like how is, even if Tim David isn't going to be in your starting 11, how is Tim David not an amazing replacement for Bison or for Maxwell or for Stoinis as like a hitter? How is that? Does that not work? But because he can't really bowl, it'll have to be somebody who is ultimately less talented, maybe actually Stoinis in that case. And I think that's a shame and an oversight.
Slightly ironic as well when you look at the move towards super subs and things, which make being an all-rounder even more pointless than it would be normally. So make your mind up.
Well, cricket. I mean, but it is. It encourages these bits and pieces players, and I think
Shardul Thacker ain't going without a 15-man squad.
I want a World Cup where if just in all seriousness, if Bairstow gets another injury, I can't remember what he had. Was it a knee or something? He did something, didn't he, earlier in the New Zealand series? If he got an injury, would I want the most versatile option coming in, or would I want the best option coming in? I would want the best option coming in, but the best option can't get on the plane because England need to take versatility, and that is stupid. Like at a World Cup, that doesn't make any sense. If you had an 18-man squad, Roy would be there, and Brook would be there, and it would be fine.
A couple of other people who wouldn't play.
And it leads on, I think, nicely to the New Zealand side of this, and I think the big story for them really is Tim Southee, who has broken and dislocated his thumb, because now they have exactly the same conundrum as England, effectively, in that they want to take one of their best bowlers, Tim Southee, who will be fit at some point during the World Cup, but might not be fit for the first 4 matches, in a 15-man squad where you need reserve seamers, and you're already potentially taking Kane Williamson, who has an injury problem. They now can't take one of their best players, and so we're going to have to see like Blair Tickner or Scott Kugelheim or someone like that play a bunch of matches for New Zealand instead of actually one of the best bowlers in the world. And
we're the true victims here.
It's tragic for the sport. It's tragic for someone like Tim Southee, who's going to maybe not play at the World Cup, probably his last World Cup, because of a freak injury, when he will be fit for matches. And he's highly likely to be fit for matches. And it is tragic for us that we're going to see, players who aren't that good. In comparison, obviously they're great cricketers, but in comparison to someone like Tim Southee, at the showpiece event. So I had lots of thoughts on that. Anything from you on any of the New Zealand? Joe Root, do you want to talk about Joe Root?
Yeah, Joe Root's asked to play against Ireland, hasn't he? Because he's not got any runs lately. I mean, it's
summed it up there.
Sure, yeah. There's no point in actually having this series if you're not, about to go and play some one-day cricket. So I don't see an issue. Harry Brook's done his job. He's on the plane now, so he's out the side. He can have a rest, and Joe Root comes in and tries to get himself into some form. I think it makes sense. I suppose I'm not sure why it's happening in the first place, because hardly anyone apart from Joe Root who's going to be in the World Cup is even going to be playing. So, you know, but it'll be fun. We'll watch it. We'll talk about it because it's cricket. That's what we do.
Yeah, it is. And we should say that we have been furiously working behind the scenes to put together our preview episodes for the World Cup. And they will be coming out, we think, next week, don't we, Max? And we've got to book in the recording, and we're still waiting for the final squad announcements. So little delay there, but you'll see a bunch of content, 20, 25 minutes on each team. Be a mega, probably be 2 shows, maybe 3 shows. A mega episode.
At least 2.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So do hit like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram and X. This is a stupid name for a social media platform.
X, formerly known as Twitter, to give it its full title, official title.
It's just fucking Twitter, isn't it? At the cricket. Did you see? I mean, like, tangent, the big time tangent. And I don't expect you to really have an opinion on this. Elon Musk tweeting support for Russell Brand yesterday.
No, did he? Oh God.
Yeah, unbelievable.
That's not a race. That's not something I want to get behind. Yeah, right. Running the wrong race there, my friend.
Anyway,
well, maybe he isn't. Maybe Elon Musk is pedo guy after all. I don't know.
Yeah, he could be. You can find us there, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the Cricket Pod. And you can support us at patreon.com/the Cricket Pod. We're going to take a break, and then we will come back with some chat about the Asia Cup and some Heinrich Klaassen madness. Like, we can't miss that.